Hello there! Too much energy.
Yeah, too much.
Hey,
Welcome to the Geekly.
welcome to the Geekly. You are so very welcome. Come in, take off your shoes, pull up a chair. We're going to spin you a tale.
Basically, we're just going to rant about a bunch of stuff like we usually do.
Yeah.
I'm Lex.
I'm Jules.
So we've got the last episode of the Twilight Zone, Season 1. We're talking about Krypton, Season 1.
Krypton Season 1, Swamp Thing, Episode 2, and Black Mirror, also
Yes.
Episode 2. But let's start with some other stuff. You saw Dark Phoenix this week.
I did. I did see Dark Phoenix. And, I mean, I went in with, like, the lowest possible expectations. Because, I mean, even the trailers, it looks cheap as shit. And the film continues to look cheap as shit. I don't know if they were trying to go for, like, a 90s aesthetic. But it just, I mean, you think about, Captain Marvel took place in the 90s. And they incorporated the kind of 90s aesthetic really, really well. And it looked, professional and well budgeted.
It's funny that you mentioned the 90s because I think we've all seen that chart showing Mystique's, like the level of Mystique costume, I guess, or prosthetics, or
It
whatever,
gets less
makeup.
and less with every film.
And Jennifer Lawrence in this, you mentioned the 90s, it looks as if she's Mystique in a 90s Marvel Cinematic Universe that included the often forgotten Fantastic Four that occurred before even the Chris Evans one. It's as if it's from that kind of cinematic universe back in the early 90s. It looks, you watch the trailer and it looks cheap as shit. Do you think this was Fox saying, we're about to be bought, let's just slowly take out the budget for this film? Or
See, like, watching the X-Men movies a very long time ago, I developed the tactic of I completely divorce it from anything X-Men. So forget about the comics, forget about any other iteration of the X-Men. These are just movies about people with superpowers who happen to have the names of some very famous superheroes, but each film is kind of individual on its own. And if you look at it that way, just some random superheroes is not bad. I mean, as soon as you start thinking about like the actual X-Men in the comics, in the cartoons, in even like the first trilogy of films with Patrick Stewart and Ian McKellen, you're gonna be crushed and disappointed. One of the things that really bugged me about Dark Phoenix is the fact that the villains are not villains. Everybody is happy and getting along with each other. Mystique is part of the X-Men, and not only is she part of the X-Men, but she's like the glowing heart who believes in everybody. And I mean, come on. Mystique is not like that. She is a cold badass. I sort of feel like they've just, because like they've got Fassbender and Lawrence playing these parts, that they've tried to humanize them and make them, likable to the audience, and you just watch them and was like, Magneto's out in the middle of nowhere with a farming community. Like, how is that Magneto?
Yeah.
That's not his thing.
I mean, picking up on that Mystique comment, I remember seeing X-Men and X-Men 2 in the cinema. Don't think I saw Last Stand in the cinema, but I remember Mystique being, I'd watched the cartoon, but I wasn't completely, enamoured with X-Men. Mystique was kind of, there was a kind of terrifying nature to what she could do. She could completely, replicate anybody that she just came into contact with. And is it like the president or something, where she becomes a senator?
It's a senator.
Yeah.
Because Magneto tries to turn him into a mutant, and it, fails horribly. And so she assumes the role and starts, enacting legislation to protect mutants.
Yeah, and she doesn't really talk much.
She's kind of like a Black Widow type character.
Yeah.
She goes in, she gets the job done, she does whatever is necessary to accomplish her goal, and it's not always good things that she does. And that made a really interesting character, because you had the sort of conflict where, Magneto and his team, including Mystique, who is his right hand, basically, in the early films, they're working to create a better world for mutants, and they don't really give a shit about humans, whereas Charles Xavier and the X-Men are like, let's cohabitate, we can live together in peace. And I feel like in these younger versions of them, we'll talk about the fact that Charles and Magneto look really good for the 90s. As I was watching it, I was comparing it to Endgame, which may not be fair.
Come on.
But it's kind of a similar thing. It's
the
the last film in the Fox X-Men franchise.
Yeah.
I expected it to have a little bit of spectacle to it, and it didn't. It didn't feel like part of a series. It didn't feel like the end of a series. It, like I said, just felt like a film about some random people with superpowers. And it was entertaining, but it's not the X-Men. That's kind of my conclusion. Also,
so recommendation, or
wait for it to come out on DVD, or your local your favorite streaming service. Not sure it's really worth seen in the cinema.
Great. Okay, well, let's talk about something that's happened in kind of geek news this week. We reviewed Swamp Thing episode 1 last week. Both loved it. Shortly after that, we found out that it had been cancelled. And so that was a real gut punch. And it was that age-old story of something that's a little bit different. People just don't really, not interested. They don't want to take a chance on something. They'd rather just go safe by the numbers. And this isn't really that, is it? It's kind of like a kind of horror superhero or horror comic book tale. And the higher-ups have obviously not been a fan of that idea. We now know that the DC streaming service is kind of folding in on itself, and Doom Patrol will not continue. Titans will continue, I think that's what they said.
They've only guaranteed Titans will continue. Everything else is kind of up in the air as to whether or not we'll get any more of it, which I think is kind of a shame because, I mean, the DC streaming universe was probably never a great idea. We've got a surplus of streaming services, and, I mean, you pay about £6 to £8 for each of them a month, and how many of those services can you really justify paying? Because, I mean, if you had all of them, you would end up putting out quite a bit of money for entertainment. And, I mean, in addition to the fact that it wasn't international, it was only available in the States, but they do produce really high quality shows. And, I mean, Swamp Thing in particular, there has been a lot of excitement about Swamp Thing on Twitter, and a lot of praise after the pilot episode, and a lot of outrage that it's since been canceled. I think it's just it's a case of DC once again not being on the ball and not thinking ahead. They're like very in the moment in their decisions to do things, and as we've seen with like the DCEU, it bombs heavily.
Yeah, I think there's that line in Endgame where Tony Stark's like, we're the Avengers, not the pre-Avengers. We do our best work after the fact. And DC are very good at kind of reacting to things, but often it's an overreaction. For instance, you get Man of Steel. Didn't particularly enjoy Man of Steel. It's okay. The point of Batman vs Superman was there will be no civilian death. We are just like completely fixing all the problems that you told us there were. Batman vs Superman too dark or whatever. Suddenly Justice League has Joss Whedon attached to it. I know this is completely different. It's like a boardroom decision, but DC kind of does its work after the fact. It'll react to things, and I just wish there'd be some long-term thinking. There'll be bumps along the road. There always are. Even the Marvel Cinematic Universe hasn't been perfect, but just if you've got an idea and a goal, have a 10-year plan. Just kind of push through sometimes. The way I see it is probably this is a reaction to the Disney Plus streaming service, which I imagine will be a similar price point. And it's probably Warner Brothers saying our piddling little DC streaming service won't hold a candle. It's a non-decision which one you go for. Maybe we should create a Warner Brothers streaming service, and that the DCU will be kind of brought into that, and it'll be one wing of a larger entity. But DC just continue to disappoint its fans by it's just gut reactions. Oh, what way's the wind blowing? Let's do this, and suddenly the wind will change direction, and they just get caught out quite often.
They grouped Aquaman in with Shazam and saying that DC has found success with lighter films. I sort of think that if DC is going to start leaning into let's just have funny films, they're going to lose the essence of what makes their stories really great. I mean, I think The Flash, certainly has potential for comedy. We've talked about how the CW show sort of started out that way, and Barry has gotten more and more brooding and Oliver Queen-esque as the seasons go on.
He's become a black hole, sucking all life into himself.
I think it's completely possible to have a serious dark film with elements of humor in it, and I think,
let's pick some MCU films.
Well,
Winter Soldier is that's quite dark.
I was thinking more of along the lines of Guardians and Ragnarok, which are both quite dark in their own ways, but they also incorporate the humor into it, and it's a very symbiotic relationship. It doesn't feel off key, and they actually complement each other.
So it's as if Batman versus Superman was made, and people are like, it's too dark, and so DC have gone, right, well, we can't make a dark good film, so let's try and make a light good film, instead of thinking, okay, how do we make a dark good film? They're just completely pivoting in the other direction. It's frustrating.
It is. And I think that's the big problem with DC. Honestly, they just need to look at the MCU model and copy it. Nobody's gonna care. DC fans will be thrilled to have an actual DCEU that is well thought out and has consistent actors characters throughout.
Give us unknowns, by the way. You know, we don't
Yeah.
need Ben Affleck signing on for 2 films and then disappearing. Or 2.5 films, excuse me. Yeah, give us unknowns. For God's sake, sign some unknown to be Batman for 10 years or something.
I mean, that's what they need to do. That's what Marvel has done, is locked these actors down for, 8, 9, 10 films in a row, and they've fostered a community where the actors are quite willing to stay on beyond their contracts to continue on it. And I think if DC just took a moment, sat down, planned out the next 10 years of films, slotted in actors that were willing to make that commitment, it could be a really great, amazing thing, and that's what I wish they would do.
Yeah, I think I said this when we did the Avengers Endgame spoiler cast. Can you imagine 20-second film in the DC EU where Ben Affleck's Batman sacrifices himself, as Batman always does, and dies, and how fucking glorious would that be? Do you know what's interesting? I think about this from time to time. In the last 10 years, I wonder how many kids growing up have become like Marvel over DC. You've created like a generation of people that are going to be buying Marvel comics, Marvel t-shirts, Marvel everything up until, their old age. People buy comic books all their lives. And I would just wonder how much like money DC have like missed out on by getting this wrong. I know
I would imagine loads. I mean, you look at Twitter polls, which are incredibly scientific, by the way. And anytime there's a DC versus Marvel thing,
people
Marvel
will give you a third choice. That's what I found out when I did mine.
Yeah.
Dark Horse, Vertigo, all that.
But yeah, I mean, loads of people are now Marvel fans and who've never even picked up a comic, have no interest in picking up comics, but the movies have won them over.
Yeah.
And they're like really dedicated to these Marvel characters, and it's a huge market that DC has missed tapping into.
Pick up your game, DC.
I feel like we say this a lot.
We do, and the fact that Marvel, obviously, we don't. It's not like we dislike Marvel. We're just DC. We can appreciate what they're doing, but the Disney streaming service, they're going to now have TV shows that tap directly into the MCU, as we all hoped. Netflix, Marvel would do. Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. would do. Agent Carter kind of is the only one that's felt like it really has. A year's time, it's going to be even stronger. They've like gripped the market by the throat, basically.
Yeah, I mean, Marvel has it. For me, the only Marvel characters I was ever really interested in were the X-Men. We've seen how those films have gone. But the MCU has got me like really, really invested in a lot of their characters. Yeah. I think Iron Man is great. Captain America even kind of won me over towards the end of his, when he became less of
a Superman.
Yeah. Guardians of the Galaxy is like one of my favorite films ever. I never even knew they existed.
No, I don't think I did either. It was probably one of the situations where the MCU's going, well, we're going to do a Guardians of the Galaxy film. And everyone's like, who the fuck are they? Yeah. Like, just stick with these guys, and then, they blow us out of the water. I think Phase 4 is going to be like revealed at San Diego Comic-Con, and I think that'll be like a 5-year roadmap. I think Kevin Feige's gone on record as saying there'll be no hint of X-Men for 5 years, so you never know what might kind of show up that roadmap. But that's what I'm kind of looking forward to.
I'm kind of excited about that, because as much as I love the X-Men, I feel like we need some breathing room from the 20th Century Fox X-Men.
Yeah. Fantastic Four as well.
You can't see my face, but every time somebody mentions Fantastic Four, I just want to be like, please God, no. Let's just let them die. You've tried to make Fantastic Four films. They've all failed. Just give up.
I mean, I would largely agree with that. I think the thing I always hear from Marvel fans is that in the comics, they are like royalty. They are the guys, and that's why so many people are kind of can't wait for them to get the Kevin Feige treatment. It makes me wonder, it's that the Avengers Tower that's being sold, people either think it's going to be an Oscorp building, or they think it's going to be the Baxter building, which is from Fantastic Four. So that will probably decide whether they come back soon or not. I imagine we're going to get an answer on that. It's been a few films now. Was it Spider-Man Homecoming where it was first being mothballed by Happy Hogan? I'm looking forward to seeing what happens with that, but we'll get an answer soon, I reckon. Maybe a Spider-Man, only 19 days away, Spider-Man Far From Home post-credits.
I'm so excited for Spider-Man Far From Home.
Yeah.
Like, I've never really been a Spider-Man fan. He seems like a kid's superhero to me.
Agree entirely.
I did really enjoy Tobey Maguire's performance, because it was kind of like dark and angsty and very of its time. Andrew Garfield, it was way too adolescent. I think Tom Holland's portrayal, or like the MCU Spider-Man, taps into that. Spider-Man is kind of a young hero. He's just figuring things out, but it doesn't feel like a teen drama.
Yeah.
Like it feels like like something that adults can actually watch and appreciate and enjoy, and it's funny.
Yeah, he's been in, I think, 4 films, and I would say I do enjoy this new portrayal, but of the 4 Tom Holland Spider-Man outings, Spider-Man Homecoming is probably my least favourite. I think him in Civil War, like in the airport, was just...
That was great.
It was off the charts. It was so pitch perfect. Him interacting, but like, when you think about Captain America Winter Soldier, just how dark that character was. He's like, you've got a metal arm, that's amazing. Just like webbing them up, and then just really good. But I've got high hopes for this one. They've had a bit more time. I think they got that deal with Sony, and then it was kind of rushed out a little bit, Homecoming. But I think they've had a bit of time to kind of build him a bit more, and so I think it's going to be a really good film. We should probably talk about some TV shows.
Yeah, we're kind of going off on, like, the entire episode is going to be us dissecting the DC and Marvel universes.
Yeah, let's crack on with Swamp Thing. You know, we are 2 episodes in. We haven't really got the bigger picture yet, but we're getting a few details. For instance, we know the kind of, I couldn't remember if he was the mayor or just like a well-known guy. He asked scientists to put this accelerant into the water to dry up some of the swamp, to either create more land for housing or to just whatever trees would grow, something to monetize basically. So we found out that about him. We got a real proper look at Swamp Thing this week as well, and god damn it, he looks amazing.
He does. He looks like he belongs in a film rather than a TV show. Like, that amount of effort and money has been put into his appearance.
That's where Cyborg's money's gone.
We had to sacrifice Cyborg for Swamp Thing.
Yeah, it was a good choice, I think, yeah. I mean, the bit where he was like ripping out bits of his head and he was regrowing kind of made me think of like a Venom symbiote situation. Yeah. Just brilliant. I mean, you don't see that kind of level of detail on TV, really, do you?
No, you don't.
This was probably my gold star of the week last week. It's probably my gold star of the week again this week. The bit where he's with the little girl and she's being pursued by this guy, and Swamp Thing like roars, and the vines pick the guy up, drag him away from the little girl and rip him into 4 pieces. It was really good. It was a kind of nice horror moment, but also we learned about Swamp Thing. You know, he's trying to protect this little girl who they seem to have some kind of connection. Yeah, I just love the guy being ripped to shreds, and we don't really get this level of horror in superhero comic book television, do we? So we had kind of 2 revelations at the end of this episode. Abby Arcane knows that Swamp Thing is Alec now because he told the little girl his name was Alec. That's awesome. She's going to try and reach out next episode. Looking forward to that. And before that, we had the fact that we haven't really had so much of the backstory about how she's led to the death of this other girl, and the mother was pissed last week. The mother was lying in bed with the girl who was lost in the swamp, presumed dead. She's now a bit green around the gills, you could say. So yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing how that pans out as well. There was a great moment with the fortune teller earlier in the episode where she asked her to like just talk to her about the daughter. The fortune teller just starts screaming. That was a nice bit of kind of horror as well. But yeah, like you said, it's left us with a real good all week. We're going to be thinking, you know, what's going to happen in the next episode. So
yeah, I mean, I can't wait. Like, again, if episode 3 had been available, I would have just watched it right after and just kept going until I ran out of episodes. So let's talk about a different superhero show. I don't know if it's a superhero show really, because Krypton, because it takes place on Krypton. So,
or does it take place in England?
That's a good question.
Let's start by just saying, the whole way through this, I was really thrown out by the fact that everyone was English. Not everyone was British, everyone was English. There were no Irish, Welsh, Scottish voices. There should have been a kind of bit of a melting pot of different, maybe even different languages, certainly people from different countries, different accents, but across the board, didn't matter if you were gilded or rankless, you all had the same English accent. It was really strange.
It kind of highlights one of the problems I have with, you know, these other planets in comic books, and I mean in sci-fi in general, this whole idea. And I don't know how we got there, because obviously, you know, look at our world and how many languages and ethnicities and cultures and nations there are, and yet every other alien world out there is just homogenized. There aren't a lot of other races. I mean, even Krypton is primarily white. We have the Zods, but that's about it. Everybody has the same accent. I mean, they talk a little bit about the different city-states, but they don't really go into it, and you just get this idea that everybody on Krypton is basically the same as the people we see in Kandor. And it bugs me.
Yeah, it really bugged me as well. That being said, there was more about this I liked, I think, than I didn't like. Tonally, I thought it was quite interesting that there was swearing, big fan of swearing, fucking love some swearing. There was torture, a couple of neck breaks, real savage neck breaks that you don't really see in the Arrowverse that much. Often these days, the thing I don't like about the Arrowverse, it kind of feels a bit like a kid's show sometimes.
Yeah, well, I mean, the CW's target audience is teens.
Teens, yeah. Oh, and also, sorry, I've forgotten the when they put that bug up Seg's nose as
that
well.
Was a horrible moment.
It was, yeah. Right off the bat, I just really appreciated this. I just felt like this was aimed at a slightly older audience, and they weren't worried about giving us a bit of violence, a bit of gore. They didn't hold back. So right off the bat, I really liked that as well. Let's talk about Seg. So he's the main character, bit of the first scene he was in, it was kind of like Captain Kirk in Star Trek.
This is exactly what I thought about when I was watching it.
I assumed you would, yeah. I imagine it's been done many times before. He's the kind of happy-go-lucky, cocky, kind of like a Han Solo, and Nathan Drake as well.
Bit of a con artist.
Yeah, bit of a...
And his friend is also very sort of stereotypical as the best friend of this character. You know, he's a little slimy, a little weaselly.
Got contacts everywhere.
Got contacts, really tapped into the underground. Kind of a very sort of acidic sort of humor. Not a very original character. And I honestly can't even remember his friend's name. It's like Ken or...
I thought it was Chem. I kept thinking it was like short for chemistry or something like that.
Yeah.
So Seg, for the first 5 episodes, he's quite a bland character, unfortunately. He grew on me slightly as the season went on, but it's difficult to believe that or is it difficult to believe that he's Superman's grandfather? I don't know. He didn't kind of set my world on fire. There was a moment where he did this kind of rallying cry when he'd united these two people to go and fight Brainiac. And he gave this...
kill each other.
Yeah, he gave this really meek... He's got quite like a nasally voice.
Yeah.
And he gave this piddling little rallying cry.
Compare that to Lyta's rallying cry when she shows up in Sagittari, or like, screw this, we're running, and she's just like, what the fuck are you talking about?
Yeah.
She was an awesome character. I think she was probably my favorite character of the show. She was way more engaging than Seg. There was a lot more complexity and conflict in her life. The relationship between her and her mother, the relationship between her and Dev, who she's betrothed to, basically. And then again, when General Zod shows up and she finds out that it's her son, and her arc was just way more interesting and dynamic than Seg's.
The thing about Seg, which I found interesting, just picking up one point you said, they've got this kind of matching system where people are partnered together. Is it like arranged marriage? Sort of, yeah. It's
like the Codex decides who's going to breed together, and then like what that person's life will be like until they die.
So we've established Seg isn't really the most like interesting character. A little bit bland. He's okay, but he's kind of having his cake and eating it because he's in love with Lyta. He's betrothed to Nyssa Vex. He's told that he is the father of General Zod, and with Lyta making Zod a half El, half Zod, which I thought quite interesting. And he's also been determined he's going to have a kid with Nyssa Vex. So
I enjoyed the kind of the sort of interesting twist. I have to say, this is the third time I've watched the series. First time I thought it was really amazing. Every subsequent time I find more and more problems with it, which I will get into.
I'm probably at that first level at the moment.
I'll get into my problems in a minute. But on the one hand, I thought it was really interesting that Zod is both a Zod and an El. This kind of ties into one of my issues with Krypton. I don't feel like they've thought it out incredibly well. I know there's an iteration in the comics where Zod is actually an El rather than a Zod, but like the timing of everything, the fact that General Zod never knew who his father was because his mother was Lyta was too heartbroken to tell anything about him, but then it sort of looks like she's going to actually hook up with Dev. So did they get married and raise General Zod together? Is she already pregnant with Zod? Supposedly Seg was lost in the bottling of Kandor, but we have another season, so I'm presuming we're going to see him again. Then where does Jor-El actually come from? Because his kid with Nyssa has a completely different name. So, are they going to have more children later on? It seems very chaotic and disorganized, which I think a lot of this season is like Ona, for example. She should have been drip fed in from the very beginning, instead of halfway through the season we suddenly get this flashback to her life with her mother, and then she goes off to be a disciple of the voice of Rao. And it was basically just kind of like one of those situations where out of nowhere they manufacture this really close relationship between a main character and somebody we've never really seen before, and it felt forced. And a lot of this season felt like that. They didn't have the pacing down quite right. I also think that there was just way too much going on. I mean, you had kind of the introduction to Krypton society, which was really interesting, but they didn't really touch on. We were just sort of thrown a bunch of things and expected to go along with it. Then you have the whole thing with the voice of Rao. Again, really interesting concept, but we were just kind of thrown a few superficial details and expected to deal with it. You have the coup by Darren Vex, which again is something that we only find out about in the 6th or 7th episode. There's no sort of lead up to that. It's just all of a sudden Darren Vex is is trying to overthrow the voice of Ra. We don't really know why, we just know that he is. You have the Black Zero thing, we don't really get much of them. Again, the leader of Black Zero just sort of shows up in the final few episodes. Then we have General Zod and what he's trying to do. Brainiac, this is a 10-episode season, and they have, like, jam-packed it full of plot lines, and as a result, nothing has really been fully developed or well thought out, and a lot of stuff has just kind of been thrown out, and yeah, I found that frustrating.
Yeah, I would agree with, I'd say, 90% of that. I felt the Brainiac one was the clearest. I like the idea that he would send these tiny little, like an Easter egg size little pod ahead, little capsule inside. It's called a sentry, would find a host, go in, it basically finding out how to conquer this planet, or this city rather, ahead of time before his arrival. I liked that, and I liked it went into the body of Rao, or the voice of Rao, so he could kind of he almost became like a prophet, even more so, because he suddenly had these superpowers. He could, like, set himself alight and he would rise into the air, and so people, they were trying to take him out, but obviously this made people more invested in the kind of Rao religion. And then when Brainiac came along, it felt like, and he was in there for like the final 2 episodes, I really liked the look of Brainiac. I felt that the right amount of time had kind of been given to us knowing what was happening. We were drip fed the idea about the Sentry. It originally found its place in Rom, then moved on to the voice of Rao, and then we finally had Brainiac. I feel like that story got its time.
I think, yeah, they should have, like, doubled down on the Brainiac plotline. That was the strongest one. I think they tried to throw in a bunch of other random things.
Yeah. The thing I liked at the very end was, I think we get Doomsday in this as well. And I don't know about you, but I felt it looked better than the Doomsday in Batman vs Superman, which is completely wrong. Him breaking out, I assume, is going to be what happens with the General Zod thing. But yeah, I like that they didn't pull any punch. I like that we had a kind of adult take on a story that doesn't really exist in Superman lore, as far as I'm aware. And we had some big hitters in there. I'm curious to see what comes next, really. I did actually finish the season thinking, okay, yeah, I'll watch more of this. I think season 2, episode 1 actually starts today, so we can dive straight into it. I thought Brainiac looked great. I would love more of Brainiac. He looked and sounded the part. Him standing just looking out over Krypton with like the red sky, and oh, that was brilliant. But yeah, like you said, let's remove some of the lesser storylines. Maybe the kind of, I don't know, what would you remove? Was Zod one too many big hitters, do you think? Save him for like 2nd season or something?
Yeah, I think so. When you have a villain like Brainiac, you don't really need any others, and to have a second villain at the level of General Zod was just too much. It should have come later.
So yeah, the season ended with Brainiac being sucked into the Phantom Zone with Sagan. I just did wonder if a 12th level intellect kind of should have maybe seen that coming. I don't know, but, and like you said, Zod makes it a police state, and the cape is restored. We haven't even talked about Adam Strange, because that's probably one thing I didn't enjoy that.
I'm curious to see what happens in season 2, but I would say at this point I'm not hugely invested in what happens in Krypton.
Yeah, I think I'm probably where you were when you did your first viewing, and I think the 3 kind of twists at the end were, well, not twists, but kind of teasers, were Doomsday's about to break out of his little capsule, Zod's turned the place into a police state, and Batman. I wish. Superman's cape that was disappearing and writing him out of existence. We haven't even mentioned the fact that someone's trying to wipe Superman out of existence. His cape was restored, but it had the Zod emblem on. So we've got 3 things there that cumulatively, yeah, I'll definitely be watching the 2nd season with interest.
Alright, we can kind of finish with the Twilight Zone and Black Mirror, which in my mind are becoming very, very similar.
Yeah, let's start with Black Mirror, because I think there's less to say about that one, really.
I mean, my whole response to Black Mirror is, what the fuck? I don't know what I just watched.
Yeah, this is an episode that would be good in a different show, like a police procedural. The Waking Dead or Spooks maybe would be, where it's some nut job's taking someone hostage and they have to get, a negotiator around and police to kind of solve it. It didn't really work for me in the Black Mirror sense. There was so little, it was very present day. It didn't feel like we were in a near future, as Black Mirror often makes us feel. It felt like this was happening right here, right now. A guy with a very, compelling reason for doing what he's doing. It's a very sad story, but just, that's an hour and 10 minutes of my life I'll never get back. Another thing, episodes are too long. This week and last week I felt the episodes are too long. But yeah, I mean, what did you make of the technology side of this, do you think?
Well, it was basically non-existent.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that Black Mirror is kind of known for, is they explore modern day issues in a sort of futuristic setting, basically where they take, modern conflicts with technology and say, okay, where's this conflict going to be in 10 years? And then they show us that. And the technology in this, aside from the very on-the-nose on-the-nose montage in the last few minutes wasn't really a part of the story. It was essentially just some guy took someone hostage and wanted this social media guru to hear his story. And even when he finally got to that point, I was just like, and he told the story, I was just thinking, what does this have to do with the social media thing? Like, it felt like the motivation of kind of a disturbed person, but not somebody who is sort of portrayed to us as the hero of the show.
Yeah.
Like, I was not behind him at all.
Yeah, I think it was kind of a confession letter / suicide letter. He thought that, he spoke to this by Billy Bauer, and he said, basically, I looked at my phone, crashed the car, it ruined my life, my fiancé dead. Like, I think I'm not sure if he was saying you've succeeded in making it kind of impossible to look away from your phones, or, hey, you've made it impossible to look away from your phones, try and change it. Obviously, that would not happen, and I thought it was very telling at the end where Billy Bauer seemed to get quite invested in this guy. You couldn't tell if it was real or not because he had one of his kind of workers hostage, but he seemed to genuinely have some kind of emotional moment at the end. But when it ended with the sniper presumably taking the guy out, it was an ambiguous ending. Billy Bauer he was in this Utah desert or something, this kind of sensory deprivation retreat. He went back in his little box and he just closed his eyes, and that was it. Nothing will change. That was what the show was telling us, like, nothing will change. I also liked it that he was kind of a proxy for Mark Zuckerberg. He basically said to the guy, you know what, you're absolutely right. This is unrecognisable from what I originally made, from what I originally wanted to do with Smithereen, which is the name of the social media. It's become this behemoth, and even if I wanted to change it, like, I couldn't. I'm basically a mascot these days. It's transcended everything. It's like, the nuclear codes. Like, when you're in the submarine, 2 people have to put the key in, like, fire a nuclear missile. A whole range of people probably have to agree to even change, let alone disband something like Facebook. And yeah, I just found that really interesting. But it was set today, and I'd love to know the numbers, for people who have car crashes and accidents, people who are looking at their phone, probably walk down an open manhole cover.
Yeah, it's kind of a worthy cautionary tale, but it's the sort of cautionary tale that would have been relevant like 5-10 years ago, and today is not so much.
I like that it was a bleak ending. I have to admit, I'm a fan of a bleak ending. I like that it was kind of an ambiguous ending. We presume the hostage and the guy, I can't even remember his name, he wasn't particularly memorable, were kind of struggling with the gun because he was going to commit suicide and his hostage trying to talk him out of it. So the sniper took the shot. We presume one or both of them are dead. So it was kind of ambiguous ending. So I kind of like that.
I'm a fan of ambiguous endings. I'm a fan of kind of bleak endings, but there was no arc here.
No.
None of the characters changed from beginning to end. The status quo did not change from beginning to end.
Literally nothing. Like, every person.
The status quo wasn't even disrupted.
Yeah. It feels, like you said, kind of like a cautionary tale, to try and maybe just, on the off chance one person watching might try and not drive and tweet. Just a little bit disappointing. I think put this episode in another show, it could be okay, just like a run-of-the-mill procedural case of the week kind of police. But when you're kind of Black Mirror and you've told us your parameters, we haven't told you what your parameters are. You're like, this forward-thinking technology of the kind of a near future, a Black Mirror. This is a mirror. This is exactly the same. There's no twist on this. The Twilight Zone. I'm going to start by saying, before this show even aired this season, I remember it was either in their original trailer or just in a press release, Seth Rogen's going to be in this season. And I thought to myself, fuck, Seth Rogen's going to be in this season. I love Seth Rogen. Really looking forward to this. As the episodes have ticked away, okay, he's not in this one, he's not in this one. Oh, he's in the last one, okay. And he was in the thing for like 2 minutes. 2 goddamn minutes.
I feel duped. I mean, even trailer last week for the final episode, it portrayed a completely different episode than the one that we actually saw. And it is sort of a clever idea, but again, and it's kind of ironic because Jordan Peele actually says at one point they don't need to beat the audience over the head, and then the show proceeds to beat the audience over the head. I would have rather watched the Seth Rogen episode.
Exactly the same. They can salvage this by giving us that episode as the season 2 episode 1 opener. I mean, I think this season for me has worked best where we've had, the iPod that could kind of tell the future, the comedian had the power to like unwrite people, the kind of not possessed gun, but like, you know what I mean, like a kind of supernatural element to the gun.
Black Mirror is the tech side of weirdness. Twilight Zone is like the supernatural side of weirdness. And when they have done that this season, it's been nice. I won't say good, but it's been nice.
So yeah, when you have Seth Rogen, who's a writer that's, what he's written has come to life, you think, shit, he's writing about like the end of the world or like a nuclear disaster or something, a mushroom cloud he mentions, and he looks out the window and it's happened, and I was like, yeah, this is exactly exactly the kind of time they've succeeded this season, so I'm quite interested in this. And so Seth Rogen rug pull was one thing, but the fact that we didn't even get this better, presumably, episode was another thing. I've written, it feels like an unearned victory lap, where they basically said, you know what, 9 episodes, I think we've done great. Let's give them some meta stuff. Let's give them some callbacks to early episodes in this season. People love that. And then let's give them a real big dollop of fan service at the end. And the story, basically, in the first couple of minutes, she said, if the Twilight Zone isn't saying something, what's the point? And that was the point of the episode. And everything after that felt like she was, you know, in Scream, where Scream's quite self-aware. They often talk about the tropes of horror within the film. And you get the moment where the victim, often a female, is running away from the killer while she's on the phone to him or something. But instead of being on the phone, she's having this kind of conversation with herself. She'll trip over something, as she did. She'll drag the leg, and then she'll be like killed at the end. It was exactly that kind of story. But at the end, it wasn't the killer. Blurry Man was the guy.
Rod Serling.
I mean, this whole episode seems to revolve around the idea that there is a social responsibility attached to the Twilight Zone. It's been around for decades, and it's like the 50s or the 60s. There is a social responsibility when you're making this show. You have to, there has to be a point, you have to bring up an issue, you have to kind of educate as well as entertain. She just walked into, she started to kind of lose her mind, and she walked into, I thought the only bit I was cracked a smile for was the fact that she walked into the episode Time Enough at Last, where the guy is like the end of the world, and he's in a library and he has all these books he loves to read, and his glasses fall and break, and he's like, but there was time now, there was time. And that was kind of a bit of a callback to one of my favourite episodes. But to just, what was the point? We might as well crack a line for the whole of the season. I mean, what have you felt about the Twilight Zone season 1?
I've been really disappointed. I mean, I'm a huge fan of the original Twilight Zone, a huge fan of Jordan Peele. The combination of the two should have been epic and like revolutionary, and it wasn't.
It preached.
Yeah, it preached.
It was a sermon every week. Do you feel, this might be too strong, but do you feel kind of better informed in any respect?
No.
Because of anything in this show?
No.
Neither do I. I think that's it. I ran a poll this week saying which one are you going to buy, Sword or Shield, and I think Sword got 2/3 and Shield got 1/3. I'm getting Sword. When I need to get a Switch first, but I'm going to get a Sword. Well, I mean, you can find us at Geek Nerd Pod, Twitter, facebook.com/The Geekly. We're also on Patreon, patreon.com/Geek Nerd. We're on YouTube these days as well. If you put in The Geekly, we're like the 5th thing with the word geek in it, so just scroll